President Trump just hours ago has said that an entire civilization may die tonight. That is not hyperbole. That is not me exaggerating. That is verbatim what he said. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. And it only gets worse from there. This is all, of course, coming as we are now literally hours away from the last of his deadlines that he has set for his ultimatum that Iran will either open up the Strait of Hormuz and do everything that he asks, basically complete an abject surrender, or he will bring holy hell down on them. He will rain hell on top of Iran. And this is his most stark statement yet. We're going to try to figure out, what does that mean? What does the region think? What are the Iranians preparing to do? And most importantly, where might this go? And we have back with us today Colonel Douglas Macgregor, defense and foreign policy analyst, former advisor to the Secretary of Defense, and of course, highly decorated combat veteran. And man, are we glad to have you on today. I was really glad when I saw that we had you on the schedule when that thing came out. Let me just, first of all, just get your reaction to that, because that is language I have never seen any American president, even to include World Wars I and II, ever use. What do you think?
It's an exercise in hyperbole that is hard to grasp. No one in their right mind as president of the United States would ever say such a thing. And I think that's an important point to make, right mind. When one listens to President Trump, one becomes accustomed to these outrageous claims. Oh, this is the greatest that has ever been. And no, we got on. You know, in other words, everything attached to him is more spectacular, more great, more better, whatever, than everything else in the world. But I don't think we've heard this kind of very dangerous rhetoric from President Trump. And whether or not you think he's serious, he's the president of the United States. You have to take him at his word. And that, I guess, is the point of the discussion.
And so the question that is on everybody's mind, certainly was the first one on mine, is when you look at the objectives he set. Let me just pop this up here. This is from his comment on the 5th. Said it would be power plant day and bridge day all wrapped up in one. There will be nothing like it. Open the strait. So he's basically, and then we're going to show a video of him yesterday expounding on this a little bit. But the things that he's saying that he is going to get done, and he'll specify in 4 hours, haven't been done in 38 days of near nonstop bombing with over 13,000 targets attacked. So one would imagine that he can't just use the same ordnance that we've been using and have any kind of a different reaction, certainly not one in 4 hours. Are you concerned that we could be talking about nuclear weapons, or is there some other conventional weapon that could achieve the outcome we haven't used yet?
Well, let me give you two answers to the question. The first is an observation by our friend Karl von Clausewitz. He said, no one starts a war, or rather no one in his right mind ought to do so without first being clear in his mind what he intends to achieve by the war and how he intends to conduct it. The former is political, the latter is operational. And the bottom line is that I don't think President Trump ever sat down and considered all the branches and sequels, the possibilities concerning where this war could lead. And as a result, I think he is caught in an escalatory trap of his own making. So at this point in time, we have to consider all the possibilities. Now, number one, nuclear, very unlikely. The reason I say that is that the use of a nuclear weapon could provoke the intervention of other great powers that have nuclear weapons. And they might feel compelled to threaten their use against us or Israel or both if we use a nuclear weapon. So I don't think that we're going to see a nuclear weapon used. Secondly, can there be something else in the conventional inventory that could be extremely destructive? Well, we've seen the Oreshnik missile, a hypersonic missile that is extraordinarily destructive in its impact. Could we see something like that? Potentially, yes. Will this end the civilization in Iran? I don't think so. And will Iran respond in kind by destroying all the infrastructure on the west side of the Persian Gulf and inside Saudi Arabia? Will the Houthis also simultaneously close off access to the Red Sea? Yes. Now, how debilitating is this? Well, we've already got rolling blackouts in Egypt. I think General Sisi, who is currently president, is on very thin ice. He could be relieved very suddenly, which would then bring Israel directly into the war against Israel. Then there, of course, are our friends, the Turks. They control the largest military establishment on the ground in the region, a very capable force. And the Turks are extremely enraged by everything the Israelis have done, and quite frankly, increasingly fed up with us. You'll recall many years ago, you and I were trading comments back and forth about all of the movies made in the Turkish cinema about Turkish soldiers confronting American soldiers in northern Iraq. Do you recall that?
I do.
Well, I think, this is something else that we're grossly underestimating. So I think as far as the weapons are concerned, it'll be something conventional. It may be a new technology. We've got a lot of things on the shelf that can do remarkable things, but end the civilization as we know it? No, that's not going to happen. And will that open the Strait of Hormuz? Not a chance. The Strait of Hormuz is already open to the people that do business with Iran and don't support the war. And the Iranians are using the access to the Strait of Hormuz to charge people substantial sums of money with which they hope to rebuild their country after the war is over. I mean, that's something I would do. But as far as we're concerned, we and the Israelis and the people that support us, no, we don't have access. And I don't see how doing what President Trump is threatening is going to improve that situation.
Now, last night there was some social media that came out that said the Vice President Vance was being dispatched to Hungary last night, and I thought that was a bit odd. In fact, my first thought was since he has been at least reported by the Washington Post, New York Times as being the one trying to push back on a lot of these aggressive actions in Iran, I thought, well, it looks like I'm right ahead of this deadline. President Trump is going to get him out of the way, so he's only surrounded by people who want to tell him to go forward. But then from Hungary, the vice president made this comment just a little bit ago this morning.
We feel confident that we can get a response, whether it's positive or negative. We're going to get a response from the Iranians by 8 o'clock tonight. I hope they make the right response, because what we really want is we want a world where oil and gas is flowing freely, where people can afford to heat their homes and cool their homes, where people can afford to transport themselves to work. That's not going to happen if the Iranians are engaged in acts of economic terrorism. So they've got to know we've got tools in our toolkit that we so far haven't decided to use. The President of the United States can decide to use them, and he will decide to use them if the Iranians don't change their course of conduct.
So we've got some weapons that we haven't used, he said at the end there. But then he started by saying, we hope there's negotiations at the end of the tunnel. But Wall Street Journal is reporting this morning that Iran cuts off direct diplomacy with the United States based on this Truth Social. Then they said there's no point in talking about that at all. But then there was right after that, there's this odd statement here. This is by Bill Hemmer from Fox News, who said he was told by a U.S. senior official this morning, we are absolutely in touch with Iran. Absolutely. The talks have been positive. We get lucky, maybe we'll have something by the end of the day. How do you reconcile those two disparate thoughts? And what do you think about the vice president basically saying something that to my ears sounds like if we don't get a resolution diplomatically by tonight, and there's no foundation to suggest that that's going to happen. Although then here's this statement by Hemmer. What do you make of all that?
Generally, when's the last time that we heard the unvarnished truth from anybody in the Trump administration? Whether it's jobs reports, the state of morale inside the armed forces, the readiness to fight among the armed forces, the issue of restoring the rule of law inside the country. I mean, I've gotten to the point now where I listen, but I don't believe until I see some tangible, concrete evidence. So that's my first observation. Second is, Vance, like everybody else in the administration, signed the Israel First Pledge. No one in this administration could hold a post in the cabinet or in the government anywhere inside the executive branch if they did not initially swear allegiance to Israel, which is what they've all done. So whatever Vance says or whatever is imputed to him, if anybody thinks that he or anyone else inside this administration is going to systematically oppose policies that are Israel first policies, and those are the policies we're pursuing right now against Iran, they're crazy. So that's not going to happen. Secondly, I think there are things in the toolkit. The problem is they're not going to end this war. They're not going to open the strait. And by the way, when you hear these kinds of statements, you need to say somewhere along the line, what was happening before the war started? Everything we say we want existed before the war started. The reason we've got a problem today in the Persian Gulf with access to oil and the 47 different products around the world that oil is vital to, is because we went to war with Iran. Let's get this straight. It's the chicken and the egg. Which came first? Well, unfortunately, we're the chicken and we came ahead of the egg. We need to understand we've laid a big one here in the Persian Gulf, and it's not going away anytime soon. And as far as the Iranians are concerned, they see lots of evidence that we, thanks to our Israeli friends who seem to have passed on their culture, their mentality, their way of doing business to us, treat negotiations with complete contempt. The Iranians don't see any reason to bother talking to us about anything. Now, as far as exchanging messages go, yes, some of that happened with the Pakistani intermediary. And in every case, the message came back, thank you, no, from the Iranians. And what we were offering was not something the Iranians could accept. Because at the end of the day, this is all about Iranian sovereignty. This is not just about Iran and the Persian Gulf. The Persian Gulf is a consequence of our attacks on Iran, but it's not the reason that we initially attacked Iran. We attacked Iran for Israel. We're trying to destroy Iran for Israel. We need to make that clear. Americans need to understand this is not a war that necessarily is in the interest of the American people. In fact, I don't see any evidence that it is, but that's where we are.
And now then the question is, where are we going? Because President Trump has walked back a number of deadlines, but this one is starting to feel like a lot more firm than any of the others, especially given what happened with this shoot down of the aircraft and what could have been an abortive attempt to have a raid on one of the nuclear facilities that went bad. And then now with this statement here, and he repeated it again this morning and expanded on it by talking about civilization and all that kind of stuff. If people are thinking, meaning Trump is thinking that this harsher language will force a breakthrough in the diplomacy and make them give in, the exact opposite is happening. Let me just show you a few examples here. This is Ghalibaf, Speaker Ghalibaf, the Iranian Speaker of their parliament. He said, it is Trump who has about 20 hours. This was last night or early this morning, our time, to either surrender to Iran or his allies will return to the Stone Age. We will not back down. The president, Pezeshkian, says more than 14 million proud Iranians has so far registered to sacrifice their lives to defend Iran. I, too, have been, am, and will remain devoted to giving my life for Iran. The IRGC, they posted this morning. Self-restraint is over. Our response will now be carried out in a way without any consideration, depriving the U.S. and its allies of oil and gas for years. And then the important part here to me, if the U.S. Army crosses red lines, our response will exceed the region's boundaries. That's the second such report I've seen. And then you look at the Iranian people themselves, and they are this morning out on all of these bridges that President Trump has threatened to bring down to show themselves that they are defiant and they are not concerned about any of this. And then you see on this screen here that there is already some activity. We've apparently already started and hit all of these things. Isfahan Railway, well, you can see some of the list of it there, to include Karg Island. What do you make of that?
From the very beginning, we have made it very clear, you and I and many others who are watched this situation develop, that for Iran, this war is existential. This is about the survival of Iranian civilization. This is a core civilizational state. Iran, India, the Turkish state, Turkey, thanks to its Ottoman heritage, these are core civilizational states in the world. They represent much more than just their own nation state. They represent thousands of years of culture and history. So none of these states under any circumstances are going to surrender their sovereignty. But we need to understand that for Iran, this is existential. Remember what President Trump said about this initially. Oh, this is just a journey. This is a journey. In other words, it's not existential for us. A journey in which we've decided that we're going to bring a nation of 93 million people to its knees. We're going to destroy its way of life, its existence. But for us, it's just a journey. Well, why is it just a journey for us? Because it's a journey for Israel. And that's the problem. This is the problem that people don't understand. We cannot solve Israel's strategic problems militarily, which is what we're being asked to do right now. Israel was already widely disliked, if not treated as a pariah in the region anyway. Now, the rest of the Islamic world sees Israel as this menace, this virus that is going to ultimately destroy all of them. And all you have to do is look at the map of Greater Israel. The map of Greater Israel includes much of Saudi Arabia, northern Iraq, Syria, Jordan, the Sinai, and some territory west of the Nile, and of course, at least half of Lebanon. And all of this is part of so-called Greater Israel. Well, we used to have something during World War II called Greater Germany, Großdeutschland. This was the expanded Germany. Ultimately, that actually made more sense than what we're seeing, because at least there were Germans living on the territory, not always in the majority, but there. In this case, we're talking about whole populations that have to be subjected to Gaza treatment. They're going to have to be effectively subjugated, enslaved, or driven out. This is insane. And this is what we are fighting for. People need to understand this. And I don't see any evidence that it could possibly exist.
Yeah, but I can sure see a lot of people getting burned down in the effort. And for Trump, it started off as this excursion or this diversion or whatever. He's using a number of different terms here, but now it seems to have settled into something more as he gets his eyes on something on a different target. See if you can pull it out of this soundbite.
I can't talk about ceasefire, but I can tell you that we have a active, willing participant on the other side. They would like to be able to make a deal. I can't say any more than that.
Sorry, Gary, I meant the first one there, the Trump Stone Age.
We're giving them till tomorrow, 8 o'clock Eastern time. And after that, they're going to have no bridges. They're going to have no power plants. Stone Ages, yeah. Stone Ages.
See, that's one of my concerns, is that he keeps going back to that Stone Age thing. And that's not just like some bombing to take out some pinpoint targets. That's like Dresden type bombing, which of course we can't do, but that seems to be in his mind. And then in some of these other comments he made there yesterday, many allusions to taking their oil. He said that several occasions there. What do you think about the objectives here? Is Trump expanding the target set?
Well, I think we've always had the objective of gaining control of the oil fields in the region. You've got to go back into the 1990s and go back and read the things that Richard Pearl and Paul Wolfowitz and a host of others in their group of neocons were writing and insisting that if we could control all the oil resources in the Middle East, then we would have China by the throat. Of course, the real intention was not just to have China by the throat, but to make Israel the undisputed champion and king of the Middle East. I don't think we're going to ever get China by the throat, nor do I think we as Americans need to do that. That's absurd. But I think we're back to where we were before. This is all about Israel and securing it and making it safe and putting it in charge of the whole region. All of this is going to fail. It has no chance of success. And this business of bombing a nation into the Stone Age, I must say, I do disagree with one thing you said. You said, well, Dresden, we can't do what we did there. No, I think we can. And I think the Iranians know this. And their cities already show evidence for it. We're doing things that we have not done since the Second World War or Vietnam. And one could argue that our bombings, both we and the Royal Air Force during World War II, committed war crimes. And you can make the argument that we did the same thing in Vietnam. And I think we're going to do the same thing here. Ultimately, you end up destroying power. You put hospitals out of business. The Israelis have been bombing hospitals in Iran and emergency centers ever since the war began. And they launched a number of strikes last night, I think because they worried that they might end up facing a ceasefire. I don't think there's any chance of a ceasefire coming. I think what they're going to end up facing is something worse than they've already encountered from Iran and potentially others that support Iran. He's in this escalatory trap. He doesn't know how to do anything else but bully. So what he's trying to do is bully once again. Remember, we talked about, if it fails, what else do you do? Well, you escalate, you escalate, you escalate. Well, you could turn around and say, well, escalation isn't the answer. but there's no one telling him to do that as far as I can tell. And I certainly don't see great evidence for people standing up in the Department of Defense and telling him, sir, this is not going to work. And if you do this, we could end up in a much wider war with a lot of other people. And by the way, we mentioned escalation beyond the borders of the Eastern Hemisphere. In other words, could there be escalation here in the Western Hemisphere against us? And the answer is yes. The drug cartels, which have always been the real threat to us in Mexico, are for hire, and they have an interest in seeing to it that they continue to move drugs and people back and forth across our borders and coastal waters. So could they possibly cooperate with Iran? Absolutely, without question. There are already Hezbollah chapters down in Mexico. They've never taken any action against us, but they exist. The Sunni chapters, the ISIS / Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra crowd, they've been much more active in Mexico. But all of these things could blow up in our faces inside our country. They could destroy our refineries, our oil infrastructure. What about our nuclear power plants? Could they cause accidents there? There are a whole range of things. And we have not done what we need to do to secure our own infrastructure. We started under Obama, and Obama diverted all of the money that was supposed to go into modernization of the power grid and other things into the pockets of his campaign supporters. So we didn't get much out of it. We really do need to pay attention to our own domestic infrastructure, particularly our electrical grid, our power grid. So, yeah, I think that could happen.
And of course, you talk about who is President Trump listening to. He got rid of, or at least Joe Kent left. So that was one voice of reason that is no longer even in the mix. He had been sidelined since last October anyway. But here's one who is like upfront and possible. Gary, let's go with Lindsey Graham, number 2 here, because he thinks that this is a defining moment.
Don't be fooled about who the hell you're dealing with here. You're dealing with people that would use a nuclear weapon if they could get it, and they were trying to get it. They've been cheating for years, and God bless Donald Trump for stopping them from having a breakout so they could build 8 or 10 nuclear bombs, and one day they would have used them. So we're going to have one of two scenarios: capitulation of their desire to rain terror on the world through diplomacy, or we're going to have a massive military attack destroying this regime's capability to ever wage war again.
I think you know what he's leaning toward. He wants that devastating military attack. And then he said this.
There is no commercial purpose for 60% enriched uranium. We need to get our hands on that. They need to give it to us, or we need to take it. As to the Strait of Hormuz, when this is over, if they have the ability to control the straits in the future, I think the world will have failed, and I don't think Trump's going to let that happen. The idea that they control the straits in the future has got to be off the table. The idea that they can come back as the largest state sponsor of terrorism has to be off the table. That they can never have a nuke, they can never make missiles to threaten us in the region has to be off the table.
So I mean, he's just laid out right there, especially in that last part. Only a regime change is an outcome that he can live with. They can't be control of the Strait of Hormuz. They can't be allowed to have nuclear material. They can't, all these things. The only way that can be accomplished is if you completely defeat the regime itself. And without a land army to go in and do that, how is that even theoretically possible, Doug?
Well, I think we have to go back and understand something. He has benefited from Israeli largesse in the community here in the United States. He is a strong spokesman for their interests. And back again to the original point, this is the Israeli agenda. Somebody needs to stand up and ask the question, why should this be our agenda? We've traded on lies and misrepresentation of events and people for 40 plus years with Iran. Every time the Iranians approached us and hoped to establish some sort of improved relationship, our friends in the Israel lobby and the billionaires that back them have intervened to stop it. So now they have the war they think they want. The danger, though, is very, very clear. If we were to embark on as this man wants us to, on this total destruction plan, total war against Iran, we are inviting future nuclear strikes against the United States. I think that's what we need to understand. We're not going to be able to strike anybody with impunity. And I think the Chinese and the Russians have made that clear. And I don't see any evidence that they want a war with us. But if they think that Israel is going to employ a nuclear weapon, let alone us, then I think all bets are off. And right now, the entire region is turning decisively against us and Israel. Most of the world is. I mean, this nonsense of we're going to fix it all for the world. They don't care about the world. There's no evidence that we give a damn what's happening. The rest of the world is on the road to depression, economic depression, Dan. You've got to look at the trillions of dollars of wealth being destroyed in the Asian markets. You have to look at the global South and understand the consequences for them. They do not have vast reserves of oil or cash. They're going to go under. Our friends in Japan and Korea are all going to go under financially as a result of this. This is not ending Iran as a state or a nation, contrary to popular belief, but it's putting us in the grave as far as our international standing goes, our potential to do business with others. We are going to be thoroughly and completely isolated in economic terms, as well as political and military terms, in the near future as a result of what we're doing. And people in the United States don't know it. They don't understand it. Wall Street was described this morning by someone who was pointing to all of the indicators and said it's complacent. They don't get it. People think that we control the world. We don't. And we're going to get a hard lesson on that topic very soon.
And, you talk about the oil and the impact it could have. I mean, this is one of the other things that's talking about is that the Houthis are saying if you launch this tonight, then that may be their trigger to close the Bab al-Mandab Strait. And that would just add yet another major choke point onto global shipping on top of the Strait of Hormuz. And now then you have an increasing percentage that would be cut off. And a lot of people, especially Saudi Arabia, has already been using that as a bypass to the strait. What would that do if the Houthis made good on that, even with Iranian help, which I guess they could do, and to close the Bab al-Mandab also?
Well, you recollect the pipeline that ran along what we called during Desert Storm the Pipeline Road.
I remember that.
Yeah. That pipeline can be destroyed at any point in time, anytime the Iranians want to do it. They don't necessarily have to destroy Jeddah or any of the ports on the Red Sea. They can simply destroy that pipeline. Most of the pipelines that are headed north are not functioning now anyway. So the Europeans are really in a desert right now when it comes to oil without oil. I think it's very hard for people to understand that once you close off the Red Sea, that adds several million more barrels of oil offline every day. You're really putting Europe into an impossible position. And we've got to go back. This is not all entirely Trump. I mean, Trump has certainly reinforced failure and made things much worse. But if you go back to the Biden administration was instrumental in destroying the Nord Stream pipeline. And everybody cheered. This is a wonderful thing. We're liberating Europe from Russian blackmail and potential control and influence. It's all crap. And as a result, Europe is being deindustrialized. The population's living standards are falling. Now, on top of that, with the oil not showing up so that you have virtually no energy, unless you burn coal or you can rapidly restore nuclear power stations. That's happening, by the way, in Japan, and I think also in Korea. Without that sort of thing, you're not going to have any power for a very long time. So you're moving into a global depression. So while Trump thinks this is all about him, he thinks this is about his victory, his need to dominate in order to fulfill his promises and obligations to the Israel lobby and its billionaire supporters. It's not. It's about humanity. It's about the people that live on this planet who are going to be suffering for decades as a result of this insanity. And that suffering is going to include famines because the necessary fertilizer isn't available. Russia can't make up the difference. Neither can China. So there is no appreciation for the larger consequences that will ensue from what President Trump is now threatening. But no one is going to tell him that. Nobody there cares. Why? Who is advising the president? Look at them. Who are they? Where did they come from? What do they know? And you can answer your own question. Have you ever run into an Air Force officer that did not believe in his heart of hearts that with enough bombs and enough missiles and enough rockets that the Air Force can't win everything? Have you? I never have. Every Air Force officer I've ever known, that's an article of faith. If you'll just give us all the money, give us all the munitions, all the missiles, all the aircraft we want, we can win any war, anywhere, at any time. I've listened to that for years. So forget the military advice. It's going to be catastrophic. So what does that bring you to? It brings you back to the people that are in the inner circle who are advising him that he's winning and can continue. And who are they? Who are these people? Name them.
Well, I mean, the military stalwarts, Jared Kushner certainly being one. Steve Witkoff is another powerhouse. I mean, obviously, that's going to be some great advice. Lindsey Graham, definitely the golfing buddy. He's always in there. And then let's see, was it Stephen Miller? Yeah, those are the other ones. That
well,
are
then you
really,
also have Howard Lutnick. You never see a photograph or any film footage of the president in the Oval Office for any length of time without Howard Lutnick standing behind him or next to him, smiling away. I mean, there are people in the White House that are responsible for creating the environment, the information environment that is feeding Trump ostensibly what he wants to hear, and are not telling him the consequences for the larger world we live in.
And you mentioned a minute ago that those around are starting to recognize this. Sky News has always been a reliable media outlet for the United States, especially during the Biden administration. They just reflexively said everything about, let's help Ukraine, et cetera. Whatever Trump said in the beginning, they were behind. Well, Professor Clark was on Sky News, and he's saying the quiet part out loud.
He very much wants a deal, and the Iranians know that. They think they're in a much better position now than when the war began. Because although, for all the destruction that's been 13,000 targets hit, the fact is the Iranians think they're winning, and they're probably right. Politically, they are. And so I think if there is a proposal on the table, the Iranians will be offering up forms of words which they think President Trump will grasp at in order to be able to declare victory and leave. And reopening the straits is easy enough for the Iranians to do because they can close them again.
Yeah, that's easy if they want to, but why would they? But I mean, he said the first part right. The Iranians are convinced that they're winning strategically, and I don't see anything on the ground, and I don't see anything militarily. To your point that you just made there, it seems that we have committed everything, put all the chips on the table in the hopes that this air power thing is going to work and that we can just bomb our way to success. But all the physical evidence screams the opposite. So where is that going to leave us tonight at 8 p.m., Doug?
Well, I think it's more of the same, only worse. There's still a failure to understand that when you run out of targets, you haven't achieved victory. And that's the assumption. Oh, we ran out of targets. The war is over. We won. That has never worked. Absolutely has not worked. And I think there's a failure to grasp that. Politicians love to believe that if they drop enough bombs on somebody somewhere, they'll give up because they say to themselves, well, I certainly wouldn't live under that kind of constant, uninterrupted bombardment. And if I wouldn't do it, then nobody else will. And they're always wrong. And we discover that people we thought would give up don't give up. Listening to Clark, I think he's utterly missing the point. The Iranians would obviously be grateful for an end to the war. Anybody who's been to war for any length of time and seen the destruction or having had to live in it wants it to end. But the Iranians aren't interested in making Trump look good. They're not interested in giving him a wave that allows him to stand up and say, well, I won. Nobody can challenge me. I don't think the Iranians are interested in that in the least. And that's what he's urging or asserting. I think he's very wrong. I think there's so much blood that's being absorbed today in that region, so much destruction, so many new enemies are being made, and so many others in the region are now thinking that we're going to have to get involved and end this. I just can't sign up for his analysis. This from the very beginning, if you go back and look at us over the last 3 years or 2 years at any rate, when this began after 7 October, and it was obvious that the whole 7 October thing was not what we thought, and that there was this larger plan that had been set in motion, which we're dealing with now. I expressed a view, because I have not been and have never been really anti-Israeli. On the contrary, I saw many virtues in the Israeli state, the Israeli people, and the Israeli armed forces. But we've reached a point now where most of the people in the region privately see no alternative to Israel's removal from the map. And this is something that worried me from the beginning. And we can't fix that. This is the problem. Our military power can do many things. We can't solve this fundamental problem that Israel has with its neighbors. It's viewed as foreign, as alien, and more so now than ever in its history. Any opportunity that might have been on hand for some sort of accommodation between the state of Israel and the larger region is gone. And it's gone. All you have to do is listen to someone like Ben-Gvir, who's very open and honest and talks about why he wants to murder everybody. The same thing, effectively, that Netanyahu says, but Netanyahu dresses it up in different language. There is no easy solution to this. The real question for us is, where do we go when the next round of war-winning operations fails? Where do we go? And I don't have an answer to that. I think the right answer is to disengage. But everybody in New York City and everybody in Washington, D.C. is going to tell you we can't do that. We have to win this for Israel.
Yeah, they're going to say that we can't, we certainly can't lose or even come out seen as losing. And that's the fallacy Dr. Robert Pape was warning about on our show, this escalation fallacy, this escalation trap, where you're going to get sucked into ever increasing and ever costly failures. And I'll end this with your view on one other thing here, because necessary and a prerequisite to make the same decision that you just articulated, what we should do, means that the guy making the decision at the top, President Trump, has to have the faculties and the wisdom to be able to look at the facts and say, well, this doesn't make sense. This is going to harm me even more. Let's go down this path. But here is a kind of a peculiar moment in the press conference yesterday, where President Trump was making the statement that the Iranian people actually want him to keep bombing and begged him not to stop.
You've said Iranians would be mad if you stopped these attacks, but why would they want you to blow up their infrastructure, to cut off their power? Wouldn't that be punishing Iranians for the actions of the regime?
They would be willing to, and it's suffering, they would be willing to suffer that in order to have freedom. The Iranians have, and we've had numerous intercepts. Please keep bombing. Bombs that are dropping near their homes. Please keep bombing. Do it. And these are people that are living where the bombs are exploding. And when we leave and we're not hitting those areas, they're saying, please come back, come back, come back. These are the people. I don't know what they do. All I can tell you is they want freedom.
You know, I listened to him, and I've watched that several times, and I've looked at his body language, and Doug, I think he believes that. I think he believes that, no, they really want me to. I'm trying to help them out. And if that's the mentality and the thought process that's talking about that, how's it going to avoid catastrophe after 8 p.m. tonight?
Well, the last time I looked, if you look particularly in Tehran, although it's not the only location, and you look at the civilian neighborhoods that have been furiously and viciously bombed by us, I think most of the people that he was referring to, that we would describe in the United States as a sort of upper middle class, relatively successful people, but people that really want a different kind of society, and they are clearly opposed to the theocracy. They're dead. We killed them. So I don't know who he's talking to. I think he's lost his mind. It's just nonsense. Now, maybe somebody is walking in there. I wouldn't put it past Radcliffe over at the CIA to walk in with ridiculous statements like that and say, here, Mr. President, this is an example of how badly they want us to continue because we're bringing them freedom. How stupid is the rest of the world? How stupid are we to believe that whatever we do is bringing freedom, democracy, and human rights to anybody. It isn't. He's told you the truth whenever you care to listen to it. Yes, he wants to grab the oil. Khuzestan, which is right on the border with Iraq, is the area where most of the oil fields are concentrated. He wants that. The Israelis want it. That's how they plan to not just enrich themselves, but to wield strategic dominance over the whole region and potentially elsewhere. So he's told you the truth. So now suddenly he reads a prepared statement, and then he tells you, oh, the poor Iranian people, they want us to continue bombing because they know that's the path to freedom. That's absurd. It's just nonsense.
Yeah, and that's we're about to find out. Listen, I know you only got about 5 minutes left here. In the last few minutes, what do you think is going to happen tonight if President Trump, whatever it is he rolls out and does something big and starts hitting power plants, et cetera, what do you think? We'll just keep it tight. What does the next week look like in this war?
I know everybody is looking for something brand new. And again, I know that we do have some technologies that can at least facilitate drops in power or the elimination of a power grid for a short period of time. But I don't think that's really what he's talking about. I think he's talking about, frankly, more intensive strikes that are designed to do more harm to Iran in the hopes that this will promote the disintegration of the state and the society. That's all. In other words, it's going to be what you've seen before, only worse. And the Iranians, I think, are prepared for it. And I know that the Russians and Chinese are on the ground in that country now, helping the Iranians, particularly with their air defense capability and other things, in order to prepare for this. And I think the Iranians will survive it, and they will strike back, and this war will not end, which is really what he wants to launch, is a so-called war-ending strike that no country can withstand. It's not going to happen. I just don't believe it. And tragically, this means nothing will change, because he's going to continue to come to the podium day after day, week after week, bloviating as he has in the past. He'll try to reassure markets. That won't work. They'll crash. The economy will tank. The financial system will be in crisis. All of these things will happen. He won't be able to master it. And at some point, someone's going to stand up and say, we can't do this anymore. It has to stop. But the people that will feel most of the pain are not living in New York City or Washington, D.C., or in McLean or Potomac, Maryland. They're living in the rest of the country, as you and I both know. They're the average Americans, and they're going to pay a terrible price. It's not just the price of oil. Everybody has to understand there are all sorts of other implications with this. Everything is going to rise. We're going to be quite miserable as a population, and there will be hell to pay. I don't think he is going to step back. It would be wonderful if he announced, on second thought, and after more discussion, I've decided to hold off on what I want to do. That would be great. I'd welcome that. But I don't think that's going to happen, because he knows there's no future for his negotiating strategy, which is to hold the population that you're fighting in contempt, to lie to its leaders, and then attack them.
Well, we're certainly going to find out. By all accounts, so far at least, there has been no change to his earlier Truth Social, so everybody seems to be rolling towards 8 p.m. tonight. We will be watching very, very closely to what may happen, but as always, we're very grateful for having you come on today. Thank you very much, Doug.
Thank you, Dan.
And just to remind people to go to MacGregorWarrior.substack.com to keep up with Doug Macgregor, because you're probably going to want to find out what he thinks if something happens tonight. Go there immediately to find out. Don't wait for the next time we see him here. And we'll all be reading it. I will certainly be there. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it. We'll see you all on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive. You know, we don't have sponsors because we hate to hit you over the head with ads. I don't like them. So show a little love back. Subscribe, like, and send this to somebody you care about.